What if your own blood betrayed you for $500 million? Picture this. You're a man who built an empire with your bare hands, only to watch your son and his venomous wife spit on your legacy, hiding you like a dirty secret while they swim in your stolen fortune. I'm Samuel Whitaker, and I was that man until one stormy night in Cleveland flipped my world upside down. A single act of kindness on a rain-soaked highway sparked a chain of secrets so explosive, it'll make your heart pound and your blood boil. Have you ever been stabbed in the back by those you loved most, for money you didn't even know was yours? Welcome to RevengeX, where electrifying stories of betrayal and triumph set your soul ablaze. We're thrilled to have you join our community of viewers who celebrate unyielding resilience and fierce courage. Hit that subscribe button to never miss a heart-pounding tale, and it'd be incredible if you smashed the like button, shared this video, or dropped a comment with the time and city or country you're watching from. Your likes, shares, and heartfelt comments are the greatest spiritual gift, the fuel that keeps this channel burning bright. Now, buckle up for a story that'll hit you right in the feels. Let's dive in. My name is Samuel Whitaker, and at 72 years old, I've built an empire from the sweat of my brow and the fire in my heart. I'm the kind of man who turned a single hardware store in Cleveland, Ohio, into a multi-billion-dollar construction conglomerate, Whitaker Enterprises, that reshaped skylines across America. But what good is all that wealth when your own flesh and blood treat you like a relic, a dusty trophy they'd rather lock in the attic than display? For 20 years, I've been a ghost in my own family, invited to their lavish gatherings only to keep up appearances, while my daughter-in-law, Cassandra Blake, sneers at me like I'm a stain on her pristine Versace gown. My son Daniel, once my shadow, now calls his father-in-law Dad and looks at me with pity, as if I'm a charity case instead of the man who built the fortune they all feed on. This is the story of how one stormy September night, on my way to a gala for my father-in-law's 80th birthday, I made a choice that unraveled a web of betrayal so vile it shook the foundations of my world, a choice that exposed secrets worth hundreds of millions and reminded me that respect isn't inherited, it's demanded. The email hit my inbox at 5 in the morning as I sipped black coffee in my modest Lakewood condo, a far cry from the glittering penthouses my son's family flaunted. The subject line was cold. Edward Blake's 80th birthday gala, the 20th of September, 6 p.m. No warmth. No. Dear Samuel, just a curt directive. From Cassandra. Father, attendance is mandatory. Dress code is black tie. Arrive promptly. Confirm receipt. It was the kind of email you'd send to an employee, not the man who'd bankrolled your entire lifestyle. My hands shook as I read it, the words cutting deeper than they should. Mandatory. Promptly, as if I were some errand boy, not the patriarch who'd turned Whitaker Enterprises into a name that opened doors from New York to Dubai. I stared at the cracked linoleum of my kitchen floor, the faded curtains, the single chair at my dining table. This was my life now pared down, overlooked, a shadow of the man who'd once commanded boardrooms. For 20 years I'd been sidelined. 20 years since Daniel married Cassandra, a socialite with a smile sharp enough to cut glass and a heart colder than a Cleveland winter. She'd swept him into her world of old money and older grudges, erasing the boy who'd spent summers hammering nails at my construction sites. My granddaughter, Lily, now 10, was the only light in this darkness, but I saw her only through stolen moments, her birthday parties where I was relegated to the corner, her school recitals, where Cassandra made sure I sat 3 rows back. I learned of her life through Instagram posts, meant for her mother's elite followers, never for me. Lily at piano lessons, Lily at charity galas, never Lily with Grandpa Sam. The phone rang, jarring me from my thoughts. Daniel's name flashed on the screen. My boy, who once climbed into my lap with blueprints and dreams, now sounded like a stranger. Dad, did you get Cassandra's email? No, hello, no warmth. Good morning to you too, son, I said, my voice heavy with sarcasm I couldn't hide. Dad, please, this is serious. Edward's gala is a big deal. Titan Ventures is sending their CEO, Amelia Cortez. They're eyeing a $1 billion partnership with Blake Industries. Cassandra's under insane pressure. I swallowed the lump in my throat. That's great for you, Daniel. But he pressed on, his voice tight. Just don't make waves, okay? Wear something sharp. Maybe that old tux from Aunt Clara's wedding. That tux is 15 years old, Daniel. It's fine, Dad. Timeless. And maybe don't mention the hardware store days. If anyone asks, say you're retired. The call ended, and I sat there, the weight of his words crushing me. When had my son become this man? ashamed of the father who'd built his future. When had I let myself become this invisible old man, accepting their scraps of attention? I opened my closet, pulling out the faded tuxedo, its cuffs frayed, a moth hole glaring at me like an accusation. Behind it was a locked safe, holding relics of my late wife, Margaret, her wedding ring, a locket, and a sealed envelope of documents from my early partnership with Edward Blake in the 70s. Cassandra had demanded those papers years ago, claiming they were for estate planning. Something in her predatory gaze had made me lie, saying they were lost. Margaret's voice echoed in my mind. Never let them dim your light, Sammy. You're worth more than their gold-plated lies. But she'd been gone 22 years, and I'd forgotten her words, letting Cassandra and Daniel shrink me into someone I barely recognized. I'd accepted their cold invitations, their whispered insults, the way they hid me from their high society friends, like a dirty secret. Enter my old friend, Jack Malone, the loyal foreman who'd worked with me since the early days. Jack, with his weathered hands and honest eyes, was the one person who never saw me as less, who still called me boss with pride. He'd warned me about Cassandra years ago, said she was a snake in silk, but I dismissed him, too loyal to my son to see the truth. Then there was Vanessa Holt, Cassandra's personal assistant and a venomous opportunist who reveled in enforcing her boss's cruelty. Vanessa was the one who'd accidentally sent me to the wrong entrance at Lily's last birthday, leaving me to wait in the rain while the party went on without me. And there was Clara, my niece, a neutral figure who floated between worlds, neither cruel nor kind, always trying to keep the peace but never taking a stand. That morning, as I ironed the tuxedo, my heart waged a war. Part of me wanted to skip the gala, to stay home with a bourbon and the ghost of Margaret's laughter. But another part, stubborn, defiant, refused to let them win. I'd go not for them, but for Lily, for the chance to see her smile. I had no idea that fate had other plans, that a broken-down Bentley on Interstate 71 would spark a chain of revelations, exposing a betrayal so monstrous, it would cost me hundreds of millions and tear my family apart. The drama began to unfold in my mind, each memory a fresh stab. Daniel's refusal to meet my eyes at last year's Christmas dinner, when Cassandra had forgotten to include me on the guest list until Jack intervened. Vanessa's smirk as she handed me a plastic cup of cheap wine, while the elite sipped vintage champagne. Clara's weak apologies, always smoothing things over without fixing them. I saw it all now. Their betrayal wasn't just neglect. It was a calculated theft. Those documents in my safe weren't just papers. They were proof that Edward Blake had swindled me out of my share of Blake Industries, a fortune now worth $500 million. They'd built their empire on my money, my sweat, and my silence. And they'd mocked me for it. My hands trembled as I locked the safe, the tuxedo draped over my arm like a battle flag. I could feel the rage bubbling, a volcano ready to erupt. They thought they could bury me, but they didn't know the storm that was coming. That night, I'd walk into their gilded cage, not as the forgotten father, but as the man who'd burned their lies to the ground. And it all started with a single act of kindness, a moment that would unravel their deceit and show them that Samuel Whitaker was no one's fool. If you've ever been betrayed by those you loved most, if you've ever felt your worth trampled by greed, stay with me. Comment where you're watching from, tell me what time it is there, and let's see how one old man turned a gala into a reckoning. The September sky over Cleveland was bruised and heavy, spitting rain like it was mad at the world. My old Ford pickup, a relic from the days when I hauled lumber for my first construction jobs, groaned as I navigated the slick lanes of Interstate 71 toward the Blake estate in Shaker Heights. The tuxedo, freshly pressed but still carrying the ghosts of 15 years in storage, hung in a garment bag in the back seat. I'd spent $100. I didn't have to make it look halfway decent, but it was a Band-Aid on a broken leg. I'd left early, giving myself 90 minutes to cover a 30-minute drive, because Cassandra's wrath for tardiness was a guillotine I couldn't afford to test. The radio crackled with Springsteen's Thunder Road, and I tried to lose myself in the lyrics, anything to quiet the storm in my chest. But then I saw it, a sleek Bentley stalled on the shoulder, hazard lights pulsing like a distress signal. A man stood beside it, drenched and cursing, kicking the tire like it had personally betrayed him. I should have kept driving. Every second I stopped was another chance for Cassandra to carve me up with her venom. But something about the guy's desperation, the way he stood alone in the rain, hit me like a punch to the gut. It was me, 22 years ago, standing outside the hospital after Margaret's last breath, invisible to the world rushing by. I pulled over, the Ford's tires crunching gravel. The man, maybe mid-40s, looked up, his tailored suit soaked through, his face a mix of fury and relief. You okay, pal? I called through the window, rain pelting my face. This piece of crap car's dead, and my phone's got no signal, he snapped, his voice thick with a New York edge. I've got a deal to close tonight, and I'm screwed. I grabbed my toolbox, Margaret's old gift to me, still stocked with the wrenches I'd used to build my empire, and stepped into the downpour. Popped the hood. Let's see what's what. He stared at me, this old guy in a faded jacket, like I'd offered to fly him to the moon. You know cars? Built my first business fixing trucks. Learned a thing or two. The Bentley's engine was a masterpiece, even with steam hissing from a busted radiator hose. This'll hold for 20 miles if you baby it, I said, wrapping the hose with duct tape from my kit. There's a shop off exit 12, Tony's Auto. They won't rip you off. As I worked, my hands black with grease, the man introduced himself. Ethan Caldwell. You didn't have to stop, you know. Nobody else did. I know what it's like to be stuck, I said, tightening the tape. Name's Samuel. He handed me a business card, embossed with gold lettering. Ethan Caldwell, CEO, Titan Ventures. You're heading somewhere fancy, huh? He said, eyeing my garment bag. Family thing. My father-in-law's birthday gala. His eyes narrowed. Edward Blake's shindig? I'm due there for a $1 billion deal. You're tied to the Blakes? My son's married to his daughter. Ethan's gaze softened, like he saw the weight I carried. You're late because of me. Let me make it right. Stick with me at the gala. Anyone gives you grief, they'll answer to me. I wanted to laugh, as if Cassandra would care who I rolled in with. She'd already written me off as trash, and no CEO could change that. But I nodded, slipping his card into my pocket, my tux now streaked with oil, my hair a wet mess. I had 15 minutes to make a 25-minute drive, and the dread in my gut was heavier than the rain. Back in the truck, my mind churned. The betrayal wasn't just Cassandra's email or Daniel's shame. It was deeper, uglier. I remembered a dinner 3 years back when Vanessa Holt, Cassandra's viper of an assistant, accidentally spilled red wine on my shirt, smirking as she handed me a napkin. Oops, better stick to beer, Sam, she'd said, loud enough for the table to snicker. Daniel hadn't defended me. He'd looked away, cheeks red, while Cassandra toasted to family unity. Then there was the time Clara, my niece, saw me waiting outside Lily's school recital, barred by security because my name wasn't on the list. Clara had whispered apologies, promising to talk to Cassandra, but nothing changed. She was a bystander, always smoothing edges but never cutting through the lies. And Jack Malone, my loyal foreman, had been the only one to call it what it was. They're robbing you blind, boss. Those papers you're hiding, they're worth more than their whole damn estate. My heart was a battlefield, torn between love for my son and rage at his betrayal. I'd given Daniel everything: my name, my legacy, the seed money for his first deal with Blake Industries. Yet he'd traded me for Edward's approval, for Cassandra's world of crystal chandeliers and private jets. The pain was a knife, twisting with every memory of Lily's birthday parties, where I was shunted to a folding chair in the back, of board meetings where my own company's executives called me Mr. Whitaker, with a smirk, as if I were a janitor who'd wandered in. I gripped the steering wheel, fighting the urge to turn back, to hide in my condo and let them erase me. But Lily's face, her gap-toothed grin when I'd snuck her a candy bar at her last party, kept me going. I'd endure their scorn for her, for the chance to be her grandpa, not a stranger. Then came the first shock. As I merged back onto the highway, my phone buzzed with a text from Jack. Found something in the old files, boss. Edward Blake fudged the books in 2080. 2. Your shares in Blake Industries, never sold. Worth $500 million now. Call me. My heart stopped. $500 million. My life's work, stolen while I scraped by on a pension they'd generously granted me. The second shock hit when I glanced at Ethan's card again, realizing Titan Ventures was the firm auditing Blake Industries. Was it chance I'd stop to help their CEO? Or was fate setting a trap for the Blakes? The third shock came as I pulled into the Blake estate, my truck dwarfed by Bentleys and Teslas. Vanessa was waiting at the gate, her smile pure poison. Well, look at you, Sam, she sneered, her voice dripping with street-smart venom, rolling up in that junkyard heap, smelling like a gas station. You think you're gonna waltz into this gala looking like a bum? Edward's got senators here, and you're a walking embarrassment. Her words were a slap, but worse was the security guard's smirk, waving me to the service lot like I was delivering pizza. Move it, old man, he barked. You're holding up the real guests. My chest burned, the humiliation a living thing clawing at me. I wanted to scream, to tell them I'd built this empire they were dancing on. but the voice in my head, Margaret's voice, whispered, "Hold fast, Sammy. Your time's coming." I parked in the muddy service lot, rain soaking me as I trudged toward the estate. The Gala's lights glittered through the windows, mocking me with their warmth. I was late, filthy and unwanted, but I clutched Ethan's card like a lifeline. Somewhere inside, Cassandra was sharpening her claws, Daniel was hiding his shame, and Lily was waiting for her grandpa. The storm outside was nothing compared to the one I was about to unleash. If you've ever been spit on by your own blood, if you've ever tasted betrayal so bitter it chokes you, stay with me. Tell me in the comments what you'd do if your family buried your legacy for millions. This is just the beginning. The rain-soaked trek from the service lot to the Blake Estate's service entrance felt like a death march, each step sinking me deeper into the mud of my family's disdain. My oil-stained tuxedo clung to my skin, the frayed cuffs, a mocking reminder of the empire I'd built, now stolen and flaunted by those who'd spit on my name. The glittering lights of the Shaker Heights mansion loomed ahead, a fortress of wealth built on my sweat, my sacrifice, my silence. Through the towering windows, I glimpsed the Gala in full-swing chandeliers, casting a golden glow, laughter sharp as broken glass, and a jazz band weaving notes of privilege. I was 72, a man who'd once commanded respect, now reduced to sneaking in through the back like a thief in my own legacy. My heart thundered, torn between the urge to storm in and the crushing weight of 20 years of betrayal. Each slight, each sneer, each moment my son Daniel chose Edward Blake's gilded cage over his own father's blood. As I reached the service door, Vanessa Holt was waiting, her lips curled into a sneer that could have peeled paint. "Well, damn, Sam," she drawled, her voice pure Cleveland street venom. "You look like you crawled out of a junkyard. What, you stopped to wrestle a pig on the way? This ain't a dive bar, old man, you're embarrassing us just breathing." Her words hit like a crowbar, each syllable designed to grind me into the dirt. Behind her stood Reggie, Edward's head of security, and a new player in this twisted game, his smirk as cold as the steel in his holster. "Move it, Grandpa," he barked, shoving a clipboard at me. "You're not on the VIP list. Auxiliary lot, auxiliary table. Don't make a scene." I swallowed the fire in my throat, clutching Ethan Caldwell's card in my pocket like a talisman. I wanted to scream that I'd built this empire, that my $500 million stake was the foundation of their smug little world. But the memory of Lily's smile held me back. I'd endure this for her. Vanessa led me through a cramped service hallway, past kitchen staff who averted their eyes like I was a plague carrier. "Keep your head down, Sam," she hissed. "The governor's here, and you're a walking stain on Cassandra's perfect night." The hallway opened into the grand ballroom, a cathedral of opulence, marble floors, silk-draped tables, and a ceiling painted with cherubs that probably cost more than my condo. There was Daniel, my boy, in a tailored tux, laughing with Edward Blake, his dad, as if I'd never existed. His eyes met mine, and for a split second, I saw shame flicker before he turned away, tugged back by Cassandra's manicured claws. My chest tightened, a raw ache of betrayal. This was my son, the boy I'd taught to swing a hammer, now playing puppet for a family that despised me. Then came the first shock. Lily, my 10-year-old granddaughter, broke free from her nanny, a kind-eyed woman named Maria who'd always slipped me extra cookies at family events. "Grandpa Sam!" Lily squealed, her sequin dress sparkling as she threw herself into my arms. Her warmth was a lifeline, but before I could speak, Cassandra materialized, her diamond necklace glinting like a noose. "Lily, darling," she purred, her voice honey over razor blades. "Let's not bother Grandpa. He's indisposed." She shot me a look that could have curdled milk. "Samuel, you're a mess. Go clean up before you ruin everything." Lily clung to me, her eyes confused. "I want to stay with Grandpa." "Not now, sweetheart," Cassandra snapped, yanking her away. The pain was a knife, twisting deeper as Lily's small hand slipped from mine. Maria, the nanny, gave me a sympathetic glance. Her loyalty. A quiet rebellion against Cassandra's cruelty. The second shock hit as Vanessa shoved me toward a corner table, hidden behind a garish floral arrangement. "Sit with the help, Sam," she sneered. "You fit right in with the dishwashers and maids." The table was a pathetic island of misfits, Maria, a driver named Carlos who'd once worked for me, and a nervous caterer, Sophie, who whispered, "I'm sorry, Mr. Whitaker. This ain't right." Their kindness stung worse than Vanessa's insults, a reminder of the respect I'd lost. I sank into a chair, the jazz band's notes mocking me as I watched the real party unfold 40 feet away, Daniel toasting with senators, Cassandra preening for the elite, and Edward holding court like a king on my stolen throne. My mind churned, replaying Jack Malone's text about the $500 million fraud. Had Daniel known? Had he signed papers to bury me? To erase his own father for a slice of Edward's empire? The third shock came when Clara, my niece, slipped into the seat beside me, her face a mask of guilt. "Uncle Sam, I'm so sorry," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I tried to get you on the main list, but Cassandra said you'd make things awkward." Her neutrality, her refusal to fight for me, was its own betrayal. "Awkward?" I rasped, my voice raw. "Clara, they stole my life's work. $500 million. And you just let it happen." Her eyes welled up, but she didn't argue, didn't defend me. Just sat there, a spineless bridge between my pain and their privilege. My heart waged a war love for my family, clashed with a rage so fierce I could have torn the chandelier down. I'd given everything to Daniel, to Lily, to this family, and they'd repaid me with a seat at the servants' table, with lies that cost me millions, with a legacy rewritten to make me nothing. Then, a commotion at the ballroom's entrance. The double doors swung open, and Ethan Caldwell strode in, rain-slicked but commanding, his presence silencing the room. Cassandra's smile froze, Edward adjusted his tie, and Daniel tugged at his cuffs, a nervous tic from childhood. Ethan's eyes scanned the crowd, searching for me. My pulse raced, a mix of dread and hope. Had he come to repay my kindness, or was this another trap? Vanessa, standing nearby, muttered, "Who's this hotshot think he is?" But her bravado faltered as Ethan's gaze locked on me, hidden behind the flowers. "Samuel Whitaker," he called, his voice cutting through the jazz. "Where's the man who saved my ass on Interstate 71? The room turned, 200 pairs of eyes pinning me to my chair. Cassandra's face went white, Vanessa's sneer vanished, and Reggie's hand twitched toward his radio, as if I were a threat. I stood, my oil-stained tux a badge of defiance, my heart pounding with the weight of 20 years of betrayal. This was no coincidence. Ethan's arrival, Jack's text, Clara's guilt, they were pieces of a puzzle I'd been too broken to see. My family had buried me, but the ground was shifting. The man they'd called a nobody was about to become their reckoning. If you've ever been stabbed in the back by those you loved, if you've ever been erased by your own blood, tell me in the comments what you'd do when the truth starts to burn. Stay with me, this storm's just getting started. The ballroom's crystal chandeliers seemed to flicker as Ethan Caldwell's voice boomed my name, a spotlight searing through the haze of my humiliation. 200 of Cleveland's elite turned, their champagne flutes frozen mid-sip, their whispers dying as they gawked at the oil-stained old man in the corner. My knees trembled, not from fear, but from a rage that had simmered for 20 years, now boiling over. I'd been their punching bag, their forgotten relic, but Ethan's call was a match struck in a room full of gasoline. My heart was a furnace, burning with the betrayal of a son who'd traded me for a gilded cage, a daughter-in-law who'd buried my legacy, and a family that had stolen $500 million of my life's work. Yet beneath the fury, a splinter of doubt gnawed at me. Could I face them, these people who'd made me invisible, and demand what was mine? I stood, my frayed tuxedo a defiant banner, and stepped out from behind the floral barricade, ready to shatter their world. Cassandra was the first to recover, her Versace gown shimmering as she glided toward Ethan, her smile a brittle mask of control. "Mr. Caldwell, what a pleasure," she cooed, but her eyes darted to me, venomous as a street hustler's curse. "Samuel, you sorry-ass hobo, what the hell are you pulling? You think you can crash this party and play hero? Get back to your corner before you embarrass us more." Her words were a blade, slicing through the crowd's murmurs. But Ethan raised a hand, silencing her like she was a yapping dog. "Mrs. Blake," he said, his voice cold as steel, "this man saved my deal tonight. He fixed my Bentley in a damn monsoon while your fancy friends sped by. Where's he sitting?" Cassandra's face twitched, her composure cracking. "He's with the staff. It's appropriate." "Appropriate?" Ethan's laugh was a gunshot. "You stick the man who built half this empire with the dishwashers? That's your hospitality?" The first shock hit like a thunderclap. Ethan turned to the crowd, his voice carrying to every corner. "Samuel Whitaker isn't just some nobody. My team at Titan Ventures dug into Blake Industries records. Seems Edward Blake forgot to mention that Samuel owns 51% of this company worth $500 million today." Gasps rippled through the room, glasses clinking as hands shook. Daniel's face went gray, his cuff tugging frantic now, while Edward gripped a table, his kingly facade crumbling. I felt the ground shift, my mind reeling. $500 million. My life's work, stolen while I scraped by on their crumbs. But the betrayal cut deeper than money it was. Daniel's silence, his averted eyes, the way he'd let them erase me. Then came the second shock. Jack Malone, my loyal foreman, pushed through the crowd, a leather folder clutched in his calloused hands. "Boss," he said loud enough for all to hear, "I found the original partnership papers in your old office. Signed, notarized, filed in '75. You never sold your shares. Edward forged the buyout." Jack's eyes burned with righteous fury, the loyalty of a man who'd stood by me when my own son hadn't. He handed me the folder, and I opened it, my hands trembling. There it was, my signature, Margaret's, Edward's, all binding me to 51% of Blake Industries. The room spun, the weight of their deceit crushing me. They hadn't just sidelined me. They'd rewritten my life, stolen my legacy, and laughed while I lived in a crumbling condo. The third shock was Vanessa Holt's betrayal, her voice cutting through the stunned silence. "You're full of crap, Jack," she spat, stepping forward with a sneer that could have curdled whiskey. "Sam's a washed-up nobody who's been milking sympathy for years. Those papers? Probably fakes from some shady pawn shop. You think you can scam us with this garbage?" Her words were a street fight challenge, but Jack didn't flinch. "I worked for Samuel when you were still hustling for tips, Vanessa. These are real, and I've got a lawyer who'll prove it." That lawyer, Evelyn Turner, emerged from the crowd a new ally, a sharp-eyed attorney who'd once clerked for me and now held a briefcase full of evidence. "Mr. Whitaker," she said, her voice steady, "I've been tracking Edward's fraud for years. The statute of limitations doesn't apply to ongoing theft. You're owed over $100 million in dividends alone." My heart was a battlefield, torn between the love I still held for Daniel and the searing pain of his complicity. I looked at him, standing frozen beside Cassandra, his eyes pleading for something: forgiveness, understanding, escape. But how could I forgive the boy who'd called Edward Dad while I ate alone in a roach-infested condo? How could I love the man who'd signed papers to bury my fortune? My mind flashed to Margaret, her voice whispering, "You're worth more than their lies, Sammy." But the lies had cost me everything: my dignity, my granddaughter's childhood, my place in the world. I wanted to scream, to tear down their glittering facade. But Lily's small hand found mine, her voice a beacon in the storm. "Grandpa, why's everyone mad?" she whispered, her eyes wide with confusion. Cassandra's claws tightened on Daniel's arm, her voice a hiss. "Samuel, you're making a fool of yourself. Take your fake papers and your pathetic sob story and get out." But Evelyn stepped forward, her briefcase snapping open. "These aren't fake, Mrs. Blake, and there's more. Edward didn't just forge the buyout. He hit a second contract, signed by Samuel and Margaret, stipulating that any attempt to defraud Samuel would transfer his shares to a foundation for Cleveland's working-class kids." The crowd gasped again, phones flashing as photos were taken. Edward staggered, his face ashen. "That's impossible," he stammered. "Oh, it's real," Evelyn said, pulling out a yellow document. "And I filed the Whitaker Foundation this morning. Samuel's the trustee. And Clara, my niece, hovered at the edge of the crowd, her face a mask of guilt and indecision. "Uncle Sam, I didn't know," she whispered, her voice breaking. I should have said something when Cassandra changed the seating chart. Her neutrality was another knife, her silence complicity in their scheme. I wanted to shake her, to demand why she'd let them bury me, but the pain was too raw. Instead, I turned to Ethan. "You knew about this?" I asked, my voice hoarse. He nodded. "I suspected. That's why I'm here, not just for the deal, but to find you. You're the heart of this company, Samuel, and they tried to cut you out." The ballroom was a powder keg, and I was the spark. Vanessa's taunts, Cassandra's venom, Daniel's silence, they were all part of a betrayal that had stolen not just my money, but my identity. I could have walked away, let them keep their stolen empire, but Lily's hand in mine anchored me. For her, for Margaret, for the man I used to be, I'd fight. "This ends tonight," I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside. "You stole my legacy, but I'm taking it back." The crowd held its breath, waiting for the next blow. If you've ever been crushed by those you trusted, if you've ever stood in a room full of liars and felt your heart break, tell me in the comments what you'd do when the truth lights the fuse. Stay with me, the explosion's coming. The ballroom's air was thick with tension, the jazz band's notes faltering as Ethan Caldwell's revelation about my 51% ownership of Blake Industries hung like a guillotine over the glittering crowd. My oil-stained tuxedo felt like armor now, each grease mark a testament to the work I'd poured into this empire work that Edward Blake, Cassandra, and even my own son Daniel had stolen. My heart was a storm of grief and fury, the betrayal slicing deeper with every heartbeat. I'd given them everything, my sweat, my dreams, my love, and they'd repaid me with lies worth $500 million. Yet, standing there, clutching the notarized papers Jack Malone had handed me, I wrestled with a gnawing doubt. Could I destroy the family I'd fought so hard to hold together? Lily's small hand in mine was the only thing keeping me from erupting, her innocent eyes anchoring me to a hope I barely believed in anymore. Cassandra's face twisted into a snarl, her diamonds flashing as she shoved through the crowd, her voice a street-honed blade. "You think you can pull this crap, Sam?" She spat, her Cleveland drawl dripping with venom. "Some old geezer with a sob story and a stack of fake papers? You're a damn joke, limping in here like a street rat trying to steal our shine. Go back to your dump and stay out of our world." Her words were a public execution, meant to shred what little dignity I had left. The crowd murmured, some nodding, others snapping photos, their phones turning my humiliation into tomorrow's gossip. Reggie, Edward's thug of a security chief, loomed behind her, cracking his knuckles. "Time to go, old man," he growled. "Don't make me drag you out." But Ethan stepped between us, his CEO swagger a shield. "Touch him, and Titan Ventures pulls every dime from this deal," he said, his voice low and deadly. "Samuel's the majority owner here. You're the ones who should be crawling." The first shock detonated as Maria, Lily's nanny and my quiet ally, broke the silence from our corner table. "Mr. Whitaker's no liar," she called, her voice trembling but firm. "I've seen how you treat him, Mrs. Blake. Last Christmas, you made him eat in the kitchen while Lily cried for him. I kept quiet too long." Her loyalty, raw and unshakable, pierced me. Maria had been there, slipping Lily's drawings to me when Cassandra wasn't looking, a beacon of decency in this den of snakes. Her words sparked a ripple of unease among the guests, their polished facades cracking as they realized the Blake's perfect world was built on rot. The second shock hit harder. Evelyn Turner, my lawyer, raised a document from her briefcase, her eyes blazing with righteous fire. "This isn't just about shares," she announced. "Edward Blake didn't just forge Samuel's buyout. He buried a codicil in the original partnership agreement, signed by Samuel and Margaret Whitaker in 1975. It states that any attempt to defraud Samuel voids all of Edward's holdings, transferring them to the Whitaker Foundation, a charity for Cleveland's working families." She held up a second paper, yellowed but ironclad. "This was filed with the Ohio Secretary of State this afternoon. Samuel controls it all now." Edward's face turned purple, his hands clawing at his tie as if it were choking him. "Lies," he roared, but his voice cracked, betraying his panic. The crowd's whispers grew to a roar, phones flashing like paparazzi at a scandal. The third shock was Daniel's betrayal, cutting deeper than any document. My son stepped forward, his face a mask of guilt and desperation. "Dad," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't know about the codicil, but I signed papers after Mom died. Edward said they were to protect you, to manage your pension." His eyes dropped, unable to meet mine. I trusted him. The confession was a sledgehammer to my chest. My boy, my legacy, had been complicit in a theft that left me scraping by while they dined on caviar. I wanted to grab him, shake him, ask how he could have traded his father for Edward's approval. But the pain was a tidal wave, drowning my anger and grief. I saw Margaret in his eyes, the boy who'd once promised to make me proud, now lost in a world that despised me. Clara, my niece, hovered at the edge of the chaos, her hands twisting nervously. "Uncle Sam, I should have spoken up," she stammered, tears streaking her makeup. "When Cassandra planned this gala, she told me to keep you out of sight. I thought it was just easier." Her spinelessness was another wound, her refusal to fight for me a silent betrayal. I wanted to forgive her, to believe she hadn't meant to hurt me, but the years of her neutrality stung like salt in a cut. My mind churned, a war between love and rage. I'd built this empire for my family, for Daniel, for Lily, and they'd turned it into a weapon against me. The temptation to burn it all down, Edward's legacy, Cassandra's pride, Daniel's illusions, was overwhelming, but Lily's voice broke through. "Grandpa, are you okay?" she asked, her small hand squeezing mine. I looked at her, my anchor, and forced a smile. "I'm fighting, sweetheart." Cassandra lunged forward, her voice a screech. "You're a con, Sam. You think you can waltz in with some dusty papers and ruin us? I'll have you in court so fast your head'll spin, you broke-ass fraud." But Evelyn was ready, slamming her briefcase shut with a crack. "Try it, Mrs. Blake. Every dividend you've pocketed, $100 million and counting, is stolen. Ohio law doesn't forgive felony fraud. You'll be lucky to keep your designer shoes." The crowd was a circus now, some shouting, others filming, as Edward collapsed into a chair, muttering denials. Vanessa, ever the loyal attack dog, shoved past Maria. "You're done, Sam," she hissed. "Nobody believes your pathetic act. You're just a greedy old fool chasing a payday." But Maria grabbed her arm, fierce now. "Back off, Vanessa. I've got recordings of you and Cassandra laughing about hiding Samuel's invites. Want me to play them for the governor?" My heart was a raw wound, each revelation peeling back another layer of betrayal. I looked at Daniel, his face crumpled with shame, and felt the weight of 20 years, every ignored call, every Christmas alone, every time he'd let Cassandra rewrite our history. I wanted to hate him, to let the fury consume me, but love clung stubbornly, tangled with the pain. Margaret's voice echoed. "You're worth more than their lies, Sammy." I straightened, facing the crowd. "You thought you could erase me," I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside. "But I'm Samuel Whitaker, and this empire is mine. You stole my money, my family, my name. Tonight, you answer for it." The room held its breath, the jazz band silent, as the Blake's world teetered on collapse. If you've ever been betrayed by those you loved, if you've ever felt your heart break under the weight of lies, tell me in the comments what you'd do when the truth becomes a weapon. Stay with me, the fire's spreading. The ballroom's air was thick with tension, the jazz band's notes faltering as Ethan Caldwell's revelation about my 51% ownership of Blake Industries hung like a guillotine over the glittering crowd. My oil-stained tuxedo was no longer a mark of shame but a badge of survival, each grease streak a testament to the work I'd done while they built their lies on my back. My heart was a furnace, the pain of Daniel's betrayal, his complicity in burying my legacy, clashing with the stubborn love that refused to let him go. Lily's hand in mine was my anchor, her innocent trust, a shield against the venom of Cassandra's glare and the crowd's judgmental stares. Yet, inside, I was a storm of doubt and fury. Could I tear down the family I'd spent 20 years trying to hold together, or would I crumble under the weight of their betrayal? The answer was coming, and it would burn. Cassandra lunged forward, her face a twisted mask of rage, her street-sharp tongue lashing out. "You think you're hot shit now, Sam?" she snarled, her voice dripping with Cleveland grit. "Some broke-ass grandpa waving fake papers like a street hustler? You're a damn clown, thinking you can steal our empire with your sob story. Crawl back to your Roach Motel." Her words were a Molotov cocktail, meant to incinerate my resolve, but they only fueled the fire in my chest. Reggie, the security thug, flanked her, his sneer as sharp as a switchblade. "Time's up, old man," he growled, stepping closer. "You're done playing king. Get out before I make you." But Ethan stepped between us, his CEO authority a wall of steel. "Touch him, and Titan Ventures sues you into oblivion," he said, his voice a low, lethal promise. "Samuel's the rightful owner here. You're the ones on borrowed time." The first shock hit like a lightning strike. Maria, Lily's nanny, pulled out her phone, her hands shaking but her voice steady. "I've got proof," she called, holding up a grainy video. "Cassandra and Vanessa last month, laughing about how they fixed Samuel's pension to keep him quiet. I recorded it when they thought I was just the help." The screen showed Cassandra in her office, cackling with Vanessa. "Let the old fool think he's got a pension. 500 million, and he's eating ramen. Pathetic." The crowd gasped, phones flashing as the video spread like wildfire. Maria's loyalty, her quiet defiance, was a dagger to Cassandra's facade. She'd risked her job, her safety, to stand with me, and the weight of her courage made my eyes burn. I'd been invisible to my family, but not to her. The second shock was even more devastating. Evelyn raised another document, her voice cutting through the chaos like a judge's gavel. "There's a letter from Margaret Whitaker, Samuel's late wife, written on her deathbed in 2003. It's addressed to Daniel." She read aloud, her tone soft but unyielding. "My dearest Danny, if you're hearing this, it means your father's been betrayed. Edward promised to protect him, but I know his greed. Don't let them steal your father's soul. He's worth more than their gold. Love, Mom." The words were a gut punch, Margaret's voice echoing through 22 years of absence. Daniel staggered, his face crumpling as if he'd been slapped. "Mom knew?" he whispered, his voice breaking. "She knew, and I let it happen." The betrayal wasn't just Edward's, it was Daniel's failure to honor his mother's dying wish, a wound that cut me deeper than any forged contract. Are you enjoying the story so far? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Just drop a quick comment below to share how you feel. It only takes a few seconds, but your words give me the motivation and inspiration to make every chapter more thrilling and engaging. Go ahead, let me know what's on your mind, and now, Let's dive back into the story. The third shock came from an unexpected traitor. Sophie, the caterer at my table, who'd seemed so timid moments ago. She stood, her voice quivering but clear. I worked for Edward's accounting firm in the 90s, she confessed. I helped hide Samuel's dividends in offshore accounts. They told me he'd agreed to it, that he wanted to retire quietly. I believed them, until I saw how they treated him tonight. Her admission was a grenade, shattering the last of Edward's defenses. The crowd erupted, voices shouting, cameras flashing, as Edward's face turned ghostly white. "You little rat," Vanessa screamed at Sophie, lunging forward. But Carlos, the driver and my old employee, caught her arm. "Back off," he growled, his loyalty to me as fierce as Jack's burrs. "Samuel's the reason I got my first job. You don't get to spit on him anymore." And my heart was a raw, bleeding thing, each revelation peeling back another layer of betrayal. Daniel's broken whisper, Margaret's letter, Sophie's confession, they were proof that my family's greed had infected everyone, even those I'd trusted. I looked at Clara, my niece, standing frozen at the edge of the crowd, her eyes wide with guilt. "Uncle Sam, I didn't know about the accounts," she stammered, her voice a plea. I thought they were just embarrassed by you." Her neutrality, her refusal to dig deeper, was its own kind of betrayal, a passive complicity that stung as much as Cassandra's venom. I wanted to forgive her, to believe she hadn't meant to hurt me, but the pain was a tidal wave, drowning my hope. I'd built this empire for my family, only to watch them use it to erase me. My mind churned, a war between rage and love. I could destroy them, Edward, Cassandra, even Daniel, with a single call to Evelyn's legal team. $100 million in stolen dividends, decades of fraud, all actionable in Ohio's courts. But Lily's hand, still clutching mine, held me back. "Grandpa, don't be sad," she whispered, her voice a lifeline. "You're my hero." Her words were Margaret's, echoing through time, and they steadied me. I looked at Daniel, his eyes pleading for forgiveness, and felt the weight of his betrayal like a stone in my chest. I wanted to hate him, to let the fury consume me, but love clung stubbornly, tangled with the grief of losing my son to their world. I turned to the crowd, my voice rising above the chaos. "You thought you could bury me," I said, each word a hammer. "You stole my money, my family, my name. But Margaret saw through you, and so do I. This empire is mine, and I'm done being your ghost." Cassandra's scream was cut short as Ethan raised his phone, a recording app glowing. "Everything you've said tonight is admissible," he said. "Pennsylvania might need consent, but Ohio's a one-party state for public events. You're finished." The ballroom was a powder keg, and I was the flame. If you've ever been crushed by those you loved, if you've ever felt your soul torn by lies worth millions, tell me in the comments what you do when the truth becomes a torch. Stay with me, the blaze is just beginning. The ballroom was a cauldron of chaos, Ethan Caldwell's recorded evidence, and my defiant words, igniting a fire that threatened to consume the Blake empire. The crowd's murmurs swelled into a roar, their phones capturing every second of the Blake's unraveling. My oil-stained tuxedo, once a mark of shame, now felt like a crown. Each grease mark a battle scar from a war I'd fought alone for 20 years. My heart was a fractured thing, torn between the searing pain of Daniel's betrayal and the flicker of hope that Lily's trust sparked within me. Her small hand in mine was a lifeline, but the weight of Margaret's letter, Daniel's confession, and the $100 million stolen from me pressed down like a gravestone. Could I reclaim my place without destroying the family I'd built this empire for? The question clawed at me, but the fire in my chest burned hotter, fueled by decades of lies and the faces of those who'd tried to erase me. Cassandra's eyes blazed with desperation, her composure shattered as she shoved through the crowd, her voice a street-honed snarl. "You're a pathetic old fool, Sam," she screeched, her Cleveland grit cutting through the jazz band's faltering notes. "Think you can play king with your raggedy-ass tux and some dusty papers? You're a nobody scraping by while we run this city. Get the hell out of here before I make you wish you'd stayed in your slum." Her venom was a public flogging designed to strip me bare, but it only sharpened my resolve. Reggie, the security thug, cracked his knuckles, his sneer dripping with menace. "You heard her, Grandpa. Hit the road or I'll toss you out like yesterday's trash." But Maria, Lily's nanny, stepped forward, her loyalty a blazing shield. "You don't scare us, Reggie," she snapped, her voice trembling with courage. "Mr. Whitaker's more man than you'll ever be." The first shock hit like a wrecking ball. Jack Malone, my loyal foreman, raised his voice, holding up a tattered ledger from the 1970s. This ain't just about shares, he growled, his eyes locked on Edward. I found Samuel's expense reports from the early days. He covered Blake Industries' payroll when Edward's first deal tanked. Without Samuel, this company would have folded before it started. The crowd gasped, their whispers a tidal wave of shock. Jack's unwavering loyalty, his refusal to let my contributions be erased, was a lifeline in the storm. He'd been there when I'd worked nights to keep the company afloat, when Edward had promised me half the empire, promises now revealed as lies. My throat tightened, the weight of his faith in me clashing with the betrayal of those who'd turned my sacrifices into their fortune. The second shock was a dagger to the heart. Evelyn Turner pulled another document from her briefcase, her voice steady but sharp as a blade. This is a recorded deposition from Margaret Whitaker's accountant, dated 1982, the year Edward claimed Samuel sold his shares. The accountant swears Edward bribed him to forge the sale, threatening his family if he talked. She held up a grainy audio tape, its label faded but legible. Margaret suspected the truth and hid this tape with me, knowing one day Samuel would need it. The crowd's murmurs turned to shouts, phones flashing as Edward's face drained of color, his hands shaking. Daniel stumbled forward, his voice a broken plea. Dad, I swear I didn't know about the bribe. Edward told me you wanted out, that you were done with the business. His words were a fresh wound, his ignorance no excuse for the years he'd let me rot in obscurity. I wanted to grab him, to scream that he'd chosen Edward's lies over his own father, but the pain was a chokehold, strangling my anger with grief. The third shock came from an unlikely traitor. Clara, my niece, who'd been hovering in the shadows. She stepped into the light, her face streaked with tears, her voice barely audible. Uncle Sam, I found something last week in Edward's office, a memo from 1995. It said to keep you away from board meetings, to make sure you never saw the financials. I didn't tell you, because I was scared of Cassandra. Her confession was a gut punch, her cowardice another layer of betrayal. She'd known they were hiding the truth, yet she'd stayed silent, her neutrality as damning as Vanessa's venom. Vanessa seized the moment, her laugh a cruel bark. Oh, cry me a river, Clara. You think your sniveling changes anything? Sam's a has-been, and you're just a spineless rat-jumping ship. But Carlos, the driver, shoved her back, his loyalty fierce. Shut it, Vanessa. Samuel gave me a job when I was nothing. You don't get to rewrite his story. My heart was a raw, bleeding wound, each revelation peeling back another layer of betrayal. Daniel's ignorance, Clara's silence, Edward's bribes. They were a tapestry of deceit, woven over decades to bury me. I looked at Lily, her eyes wide with confusion, and felt the weight of Margaret's dying wish to protect my soul from their greed. I wanted to burn it all down, to let Evelyn's legal team unleash hell with charges of fraud and theft. $100 million in dividends, a stolen empire worth $500 million. It was all mine to reclaim. But Lily's voice, soft and pleading, broke through. Grandpa, why's everyone yelling? She asked, her hand tightening in mine. Are you in trouble? Her innocence was a mirror, reflecting the man I'd been before they broke me, a man who'd built for love, not vengeance. I turned to the crowd, my voice a thunderclap. You thought you could erase me, but I'm Samuel Whitaker, the man who built this empire with my hands, my heart, my blood. You stole my legacy, but you can't steal my truth. Ethan raised his phone again, the recording app still glowing. Every word tonight is evidence, he said. Edward, Cassandra, you've admitted to fraud in front of 200 witnesses. Titan Ventures is done with you, unless Samuel says otherwise. Cassandra's scream was a banshee's wail, but Maria stepped forward, her phone still playing Vanessa's damning laughter. The world's watching, she said, her voice steady now. Mr. Whitaker's not alone anymore. Amen. My mind was a battlefield, love and rage locked in a brutal dance. I could destroy them. Edward's empire, Cassandra's pride, Daniel's illusions with a single nod to Evelyn. But Lily's hand, Margaret's letter, Jack's loyalty, they held me back. I looked at Daniel, his face a mask of shame, and saw the boy I'd raised, lost in a world that had poisoned him. You broke my heart, son, I said, my voice cracking. But this isn't over. The ballroom was a live wire, the crowd waiting for my next move. If you've ever been betrayed by those you loved, if you've ever felt your soul crushed by lies worth millions, tell me in the comments what you'd do when the throne is yours to claim. Stay with me, the reckoning's here. The ballroom was a tinderbox, Ethan Caldwell's recorded evidence, and my defiant words setting the Blake empire ablaze. The crowd's roar was a living thing, their phones flashing like vultures circling a dying beast. My oil-stained tuxedo, once a symbol of my erasure, now stood as a testament to my survival, each mark a scar from the war I'd fought against those who'd stolen my legacy. My heart was a shattered mirror, reflecting the agony of Daniel's betrayal and the faint hope kindled by Lily's unwavering trust. Her small hand in mine was a tether to the man I used to be, but the weight of Margaret's letter, the $100 million in stolen dividends, and the decades of lies pressed down like a noose. Could I wield this truth to reclaim my place without obliterating the family I'd built this empire for? The question was a blade, slicing through my resolve, but the fire in my chest roared louder, fueled by the faces of those who dared to bury me. Cassandra's scream cut through the chaos, her face a mask of feral desperation. "You're a damn fraud, Sam," she shrieked, her Cleveland street edge sharper than ever. "Think you can waltz in here with your bum-ass sob story and torch our world? You're a washed-up nobody, clutching fake papers like a junkie chasing a hit. Get lost before I make you regret crawling out of your hole." Her words were a flamethrower, meant to burn me to ash, but they only stoked my fury. Reggie, the security thug, loomed closer, his fists clenched like sledgehammers. "You're done, old man," he snarled. "Keep pushing, and I'll bury you myself." But Evelyn Turner stepped forward, her lawyer's poise, a steel wall. "Threaten him again, and I'll have you arrested for assault," she said, her voice slicing through the din. "Samuel's the majority owner. You're the ones who should be running." The first shock detonated like a bomb. Carlos, the driver who'd once worked for me, pulled a crumpled letter from his pocket, his voice trembling with rage. "This is from my cousin who worked in Edward's office in the 80s, he said, holding it up. "She wrote to me before she died, saying Edward had her shred documents that proved Samuel's stake in Blake Industries. She was scared, said Edward threatened to ruin her if she talked." The crowd's gasps were a tidal wave, their phones capturing the letter's faded ink. Carlos's loyalty, his refusal to let my legacy be erased, was a beacon in the storm. He'd been a kid when I'd hired him, fresh out of high school, and now he stood for me when my own son wouldn't. My eyes burned, the weight of his sacrifice clashing with the betrayal of those who'd profited from my silence. The second shock was a knife to the soul. Maria, Lily's nanny, raised her phone again, her hands steady now. "I found this in Cassandra's office last week," she said, playing an audio clip. It was Vanessa's voice, cold and mocking. "We cut Sam's access to the board portal years ago. Let him think he's retired. He's too old to notice." The clip shifted to Cassandra's laugh. "Good. Keep the old bastard clueless. 500 million. And he's still driving that junkyard truck." The crowd erupted, voices shouting, cameras flashing as Cassandra's face turned ghostly pale. Maria's courage, her willingness to risk everything for me, was a lifeline. She'd seen me at my lowest, slipping Lily's drawings to me when Cassandra wasn't looking, and now she was tearing down their lies. I wanted to thank her, but the pain of their betrayal, Daniel's silence, Cassandra's cruelty choked me, a raw wound that bled with every word. The third shock came from a new traitor, Leonard, Edward's longtime accountant, who'd been lurking near the bar. He stepped forward, his face ashen, his voice shaking. I can't stay quiet anymore," he stammered. "In 2005, Edward had me funnel Samuel's dividends into a secret trust for his own kids. He said Samuel was too unstable to handle the money. I knew it was wrong, but he paid me to keep quiet." His confession was a grenade, shattering the last of Edward's defenses. The crowd was a mob now, some shouting for justice, others filming Leonard's trembling hands. Vanessa spun on him, her voice a vicious hiss. "You backstabbing rat," she screamed. "You think you can flip on us now? Sam's a nobody, and you're just a coward." But Jack Malone shoved her back, his loyalty fierce as ever. "Leonard's telling the truth, and you know it," he growled. "Samuel built this company while you were still scheming for scraps." My heart was a raw, bleeding wound, each revelation a fresh cut. Daniel's complicity, Cassandra's schemes, Leonard's betrayal, they were a tapestry of greed, woven to keep me invisible. I looked at Clara, my niece, standing frozen, her eyes pleading for forgiveness. "Uncle Sam, I should have checked the accounts," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. I thought they were just protecting the family. Her neutrality was a betrayal of its own, her silence enabling their lies. I wanted to forgive her, to believe she hadn't meant to hurt me, but the pain was a tsunami, drowning my hope. I'd built this empire for love, for Daniel, for Lily, only to watch them use it to erase me. The temptation to let Evelyn unleash a legal firestorm, $100 million in stolen dividends, a $500 million empire was overwhelming. But Lily's voice broke through. "Grandpa, Are we still family? She asked, her eyes wide with fear. Her question was a mirror, reflecting the man I'd been before they broke me. A man who'd built for love, not destruction. I turned to Daniel, my voice raw. You let them steal my life, son, I said, each word a wound. But I'm not done fighting for you. Then I faced the crowd, my voice a thunderbolt. You thought you could break me, but I'm Samuel Whitaker, and this empire is mine. You stole my money, my family, my soul. Now you pay. Ethan nodded, his phone still recording. The world's watching, he said. Every lie you've told tonight is evidence. You're finished unless Samuel says otherwise. Cassandra's scream was a dying animal's cry, but Maria's steady gaze held me firm. You've got us, Mr. Whitaker, she said. You're not alone. The ballroom was a volcano, and I was the eruption. If you've ever been crushed by those you loved, if you've ever felt your heart torn by lies worth millions, tell me in the comments what you do when the truth becomes an inferno. Stay with me, the ashes are falling. The ballroom was a crucible, my words of defiance, and the cascading revelations of betrayal turning the Blake Empire to ash. The crowd's uproar was a living beast, their phones flashing like lightning in a storm, capturing the collapse of a dynasty built on my stolen legacy. My oil-stained tuxedo, now a symbol of my resilience, bore the weight of 20 years of lies, lies that had cost me $100 million in dividends and a $500 million empire. My heart was a jagged wound, bleeding with the pain of Daniel's complicity, yet tethered to the fragile hope in Lily's wide, trusting eyes. Her small hand in mine was a lifeline, but the storm within me raged. Could I deliver justice without shattering the family I'd poured my soul into? The fire of my anger burned bright, fueled by Cassandra's venom, Edward's greed, and the silent betrayals of those who'd watched me fade into obscurity. But as I stood there, the man they'd tried to erase, I knew the truth was my weapon, and the time for reckoning had come. Cassandra's face was a mask of raw panic, her designer gown clinging to her like a shroud as she shoved through the crowd, her voice a street-honed blade. You're a low-life scam artist, Sam, she screamed, her Cleveland drawl dripping with venom. Think you can strut in here with your greasy-ass rags and some bullshit papers to ruin us? You're a deadbeat who never belonged in our world. Scram before I make you wish you'd stayed in your rat-infested dump. Her words were a public execution, meant to grind me into dust, but they only fanned the flames of my resolve. Reggie, the security thug, cracked his neck, his eyes glinting with menace. You're out of moves, old man, he growled. Keep this up and I'll drag you out myself, face first. But Ethan Caldwell stepped forward, his CEO presence a fortress. One more threat, and Titan Ventures buries you in lawsuits, he said, his voice a cold cutting edge. Samuel's the king here. You're the ones kneeling. The first shock hit like a sledgehammer. Sophie, the caterer who'd confessed her role in Edward's schemes, pulled a USB drive from her apron, her hands trembling, but her voice steady. I kept backups, she said, her eyes locked on mine. Emails from Edward to his lawyers, ordering them to block Samuel's access to board meetings in the 90s. They called him the old liability and laughed about keeping him in the dark. The crowd's gasps were a tidal wave, their phones flashing as Sophie handed the drive to Evelyn. Her courage, born from years of guilt, was a beacon in the chaos. She'd been complicit once, but now she stood for me, risking everything to right a wrong. My throat tightened, her redemption a stark contrast to the betrayal of those who'd profited from my silence. The second shock was a dagger through my heart. Jack Malone, my loyal foreman, stepped forward with a faded photograph, his voice thick with emotion. This is from 1975, he said, holding it up. Samuel and Edward, breaking ground on Blake Industries' first project. Samuel put up the cash when Edward was broke, but Edward wrote him out of the company's history books. The photo showed me, young and proud, shovel in hand, next to a grinning Edward. The crowd's murmurs turned to shouts, their phones capturing the image as Daniel's face crumpled. Dad, I didn't know, he whispered, his voice breaking. Edward said you walked away, that you didn't want the spotlight. His words were a fresh wound, his ignorance a betrayal, as deep as Edward's lies. I wanted to scream, to demand how he could have believed I'd abandoned my life's work, but the pain was a vice, squeezing my heart until I could barely breathe. The third shock came from a new betrayer, Marcus, Edward's longtime driver, who'd been silent until now. He stepped into the light, his face pale, his voice shaking. I drove Edward to a meeting in 2010, he confessed. He met with a banker to transfer Samuel's dividends into a shell company for Cassandra's trust fund. I heard him say, Sam's too old to fight back. Let him rot. I I should have spoken up, but he paid me to stay quiet. His admission was a bombshell, shattering the last of Cassandra's defenses. The crowd was a riot now, some shouting for justice, others filming Marcus's trembling hands. Vanessa lunged at him, her voice a vicious screech. "You traitorous punk!" she screamed. "You think you can flip on us now? Sam's a washed-up loser and you're just a sellout." But Maria grabbed her arm, her loyalty fierce. "Enough, Vanessa," she snapped. "Mr. Whitaker's got more heart than you'll ever know." My heart was a raw, bleeding wound. Each revelation a fresh cut. Daniel's ignorance, Marcus's silence, Edward's schemes. They were a web of betrayal, spun to keep me invisible. I looked at Clara, my niece, standing frozen, her eyes brimming with tears. "Uncle Sam, I found those emails too," she whispered, her voice barely audible. I thought they were just business talk. I didn't want to cause trouble. Her neutrality was a betrayal of its own, her silence enabling their greed. I wanted to forgive her, to believe she hadn't meant to hurt me. But the pain was a hurricane, tearing through my hope. I'd built this empire for my family, only to watch them use it to erase me. The urge to let Evelyn unleash a legal onslaught, $100 million in stolen dividends, a $500 million empire was overwhelming, but Lily's voice broke through. "Grandpa, are we still family?" she asked, her eyes glistening. Her question was a mirror, reflecting the man I'd been before they broke me, a man who'd built for love, not vengeance. I turned to Daniel, my voice a broken shard. "You let them steal my soul, son," I said, tears burning my eyes. "But I'm still fighting for yours." Then I faced the crowd, my voice a thunderclap. "You thought you could bury me. But I'm Samuel Whitaker, and this empire is mine. You stole my legacy, but you can't steal my truth." Ethan nodded, his phone still recording. "The evidence is ironclad," he said. "Edward, Cassandra, you're done unless Samuel gives you mercy." Cassandra's scream was a dying beast's cry, but Maria's steady gaze held me firm. "We're with you, Mr. Whitaker," she said. "You're not invisible anymore." The ballroom was a maelstrom, and I was the storm. If you've ever been crushed by those you loved, if you've ever felt your heart torn by lies worth millions, tell me in the comments what you'd do when the truth becomes a verdict. Stay with me, the judgment's coming. The ballroom was a maelstrom of shattered illusions, my declaration of truth, and the cascade of betrayals turning the Blake Empire into a smoldering ruin. The crowd's frenzy was a living beast, their phones flashing like a storm of fireflies, capturing the downfall of a dynasty built on my stolen legacy. My oil-stained tuxedo, now a symbol of defiance, carried the weight of 20 years of lies, lies that had robbed me of $100 million in dividends and a $500 million empire. My heart was a fractured battlefield, torn between the agony of Daniel's complicity and the fragile hope sparked by Lily's unwavering trust. Her small hand in mine was a beacon, but the storm within me raged. Could I deliver justice without annihilating the family I'd built this empire for? The fire of my anger burned white-hot, fueled by the venom of Cassandra's screams, Edward's crumbling facade, and the silent betrayals of those who'd let me fade into oblivion. Yet, as I stood there, the man they'd tried to erase, I knew the truth was my gavel, and the verdict was mine to deliver. Cassandra's face was a mask of desperate fury, her designer gown wilting as she clawed through the crowd, her voice a street-honed blade dripping with Cleveland grit. "You're a filthy con, Sam," she shrieked, her words a public guillotine. "Think you can roll in here with your stinking rags and some forged papers to burn us down? You're a broke ass Ben who's been milking pity for decades. Crawl back to your dump before I make you choke on your own lies." Her venom was a wildfire, meant to incinerate my resolve, but it only stoked the inferno in my chest. Reggie, the security thug, loomed behind her, his fists clenched like wrecking balls. "You're done, old man," he snarled, his voice a low growl. "Keep this up, and I'll smash you into the ground myself." But Ethan Caldwell stepped forward, his CEO authority a fortress of steel. "One more word, and Titan Ventures drags you through every court in Ohio," he said, his voice a cold, lethal promise. "Samuel's the one holding the cards now. You're the ones begging." The first shock hit like a seismic quake. Maria, Lily's nanny, raised her voice, her eyes blazing with righteous fire. "I found something else," she said, holding up a crumpled note. "It's from Cassandra's desk, dated last year. It's a plan to sell off Blake Industries' assets to a shell company, cutting Samuel out completely. They called it cleaning up the old man's mess." The crowd's gasps were a tidal wave, their phones flashing as Maria's note was passed to Evelyn. Her loyalty, forged in the quiet moments of slipping Lily's drawings to me, was a lighthouse in the storm. She'd risked everything to stand with me, and the weight of her courage made my throat tighten. I'd been invisible to my family, but Maria had seen me, had fought for me when my own blood hadn't. The second shock was a dagger through my soul. Evelyn Turner pulled a sealed envelope from her briefcase, her voice steady but sharp as a scalpel. "This is a notarized letter from Margaret Whitaker, written in 2003, just before her death," she said. "It's addressed to the board of Blake Industries, demanding that Samuel's shares be protected." She sent copies to Edward's lawyers, but they buried it. Evelyn read aloud, her tone soft but unyielding. "If my husband's legacy is stolen, let this letter be a curse on those who betray him. He built this company with his heart, and no one has the right to take it." The words were Margaret's voice, echoing through 22 years, and they broke me. Daniel staggered, his face a mask of anguish. "Dad, I never saw that letter," he choked out. Edward said Mom was delusional, that she didn't understand business. His confession was a fresh wound, his blind trust in Edward, a betrayal that cut deeper than any forged document. I wanted to scream, to demand how he could have ignored his mother's dying plea, but the pain was a chokehold, strangling my anger with grief. The third shock came from a new betrayer, Tessa, Edward's personal secretary, who'd been silent in the shadows. She stepped forward, her face pale, her voice trembling. I typed those asset sale plans last year," she confessed, her eyes avoiding mine. "Cassandra told me Samuel was senile, that he'd agreed to step back. I didn't question it because they paid me extra to keep quiet." Her admission was a grenade, shattering the last of Edward's defenses. The crowd was a riot now, voices shouting, cameras flashing as Tessa's hands shook. Vanessa lunged at her, her voice a vicious screech. "You backstabbing bitch," she screamed. "You think you can rat us out now? Sam's a washed-up loser, and you're just a cheap sellout." But Carlos grabbed her arm, his loyalty fierce. "Shut it, Vanessa," he growled. "Samuel gave me a chance when no one else would. You don't get to bury him anymore." My heart was a raw, bleeding wound, each revelation a fresh cut. Daniel's blindness, Tessa's silence, Edward's schemes. They were a web of deceit, spun to keep me invisible. I looked at Clara, my niece, standing frozen, her eyes streaming with tears. "Uncle Sam, I saw those plans too," she whispered, her voice breaking. I thought they were just protecting the company. I should have told you." Her neutrality was a betrayal of its own, her silence enabling their greed. I wanted to forgive her, to believe she hadn't meant to hurt me, but the pain was a hurricane, tearing through my hope. I'd built this empire for my family, only to watch them use it to erase me. The urge to let Evelyn unleash a legal firestorm, $100 million in stolen dividends, a $500 million empire was overwhelming. But Lily's voice broke through. "Grandpa, do you still love us?" she asked, her eyes glistening with fear. Her question was a mirror, reflecting the man I'd been before they broke me, a man who'd built for love, not vengeance. I turned to Daniel, my voice a broken shard. "You let them steal my life, son," I said, tears burning my eyes. "But I'm not giving up on you." Then I faced the crowd, my voice a thunderbolt. "You thought you could erase me, but I'm Samuel Whitaker, and this empire is mine. You stole my legacy, but you can't steal my soul." Ethan nodded, his phone still recording. "The evidence is airtight," he said. "Edward, Cassandra, you're done unless Samuel shows mercy." Cassandra's scream was a dying beast's cry, but Maria's steady gaze held me firm. "We're with you, Mr. Whitaker," she said. "You're not invisible anymore." The ballroom was a volcano, and I was the eruption. If you've ever been crushed by those you loved, if you've ever felt your heart torn by lies worth millions, tell me in the comments what you do when the truth demands justice. Stay with me, the verdict's here. The ballroom was a furnace, my unyielding truth and the relentless tide of betrayals, reducing the Blake Empire to cinders. The crowd's roar was a primal beast, their phones flashing like a swarm of vultures, immortalizing the collapse of a dynasty forged on my stolen legacy. My oil-stained tuxedo, now a mantle of defiance, bore the scars of a 20-year war against those who'd erased me, robbing me of $100 million in dividends and a $500 million empire. My heart was a fractured cathedral, its walls crumbling under the weight of Daniel's complicity, yet held together by the fragile hope in Lily's trusting gaze. Her small hand in mine was a sanctuary, but the storm within me howled. Could I wield justice without annihilating the family I'd built this empire for? The fire of my rage burned molten, fueled by Cassandra's venom, Edward's crumbling lies, and the silent betrayals of those who'd let me vanish into obscurity. As I stood there, the man they'd tried to bury, I knew the truth was my sword, and the time for judgment had arrived. Cassandra's face was a twisted wreck of fury and fear, her designer gown sagging like a defeated flag as she lunged through the crowd, her voice a street-sharpened blade dripping with Cleveland venom. "You're a stinking liar, Sam," she screamed, her words a public crucifixion. "Think you can swagger in here with your filthy rags and some trash papers to torch our lives? You're a broke-ass nobody who's been milking sympathy for years. Get your sorry ass out of here before I make you wish you died in that dump." Her venom was a hurricane, meant to shred my resolve, but it only fueled the inferno in my chest. Reggie, the security thug, stepped closer, his eyes glinting with menace. "You're finished, old man," he growled, cracking his knuckles. "Keep this up, and I'll crush you like the garbage you are." But Ethan Caldwell raised a hand, his CEO authority a wall of iron. "One more step, and Titan Ventures buries you in court," he said, his voice a cold, lethal promise. "Samuel's the one calling the shots now. You're the ones pleading." The first shock hit like a thunderbolt. Jack Malone, my loyal foreman, pulled a faded notebook from his jacket, his voice thick with righteous anger. "This is Samuel's journal from 1976, he said, holding it up. "It details every loan he gave Edward to keep Blake Industries afloat. Loans Edward never repaid, worth millions today. He called them investments, but they were Samuel's blood and sweat." The crowd's gasps were a tidal wave, their phones flashing as Jack's notebook was passed to Evelyn. His loyalty, forged in decades of working side by side, was a beacon in the chaos. He'd been there when I'd mortgaged my home to save Edward's failing projects, and now he stood for me when my own son wouldn't. My eyes burned, the weight of his faith clashing with the betrayal of those who'd turned my sacrifices into their fortune. The second shock was a spear through my soul. Maria, Lily's nanny, stepped forward with a trembling hand, holding up a handwritten note. "This is from Lily's school counselor, dated last month," she said, her voice steady but raw. "Cassandra told the school to keep Samuel away from Lily's events, saying he was unstable and a bad influence. They banned him from campus." The crowd's murmurs turned to shouts, phones flashing as Maria's note was displayed. Her courage, born from years of watching me sidelined, was a lifeline. She'd slipped Lily's drawings to me in secret, defying Cassandra's orders, and now she was tearing down their lies. Daniel's face crumpled, his voice a broken whisper. "Dad, I didn't know about the school," he choked out. "Cassandra said it was for Lily's safety." His words were a fresh wound, his ignorance a betrayal that cut deeper than any forged document. I wanted to scream, to demand how he could have let them erase me from my granddaughter's life, but the pain was a vice, squeezing my heart until I could barely breathe. The third shock came from a new betrayer, Clara's husband, Greg, who'd been silent in the shadows. He stepped forward, his face pale, his voice shaking. I overheard Cassandra and Edward last year," he confessed, avoiding my gaze. "They were planning to transfer Samuel's shares to a new holding company, claiming he'd signed them over willingly. I didn't tell Clara because Edward promised me a promotion." His admission was a bombshell, shattering the last of Cassandra's defenses. The crowd was a mob now, some shouting for justice, others filming Greg's trembling hands. Vanessa lunged at him, her voice a vicious screech. "You gutless snitch," she screamed. "You think you can turn on us now? Sam's a washed-up loser, and you're just a spineless punk." But Carlos grabbed her arm, his loyalty fierce. "Shut it, Vanessa," he growled. "Samuel gave me a chance when I had nothing. You don't get to bury him anymore." My heart was a raw, bleeding wound. Each revelation a fresh cut. Daniel's ignorance, Greg's silence, Edward's schemes, they were a web of deceit, spun to keep me invisible. I looked at Clara, her eyes streaming with tears, her hands clasped in desperation. "Uncle Sam, I didn't know Greg was involved," she whispered, her voice breaking. I thought I was protecting our family." Her neutrality was a betrayal of its own, her silence enabling their greed. I wanted to forgive her, to believe she hadn't meant to hurt me, but the pain was a tsunami, drowning my hope. I'd built this empire for my family, only to watch them use it to erase me. The urge to let Evelyn unleash a legal onslaught, $100 million in stolen dividends, a $500 million empire was overwhelming, but Lily's voice broke through. "Grandpa, will you still come to my school plays?" she asked, her eyes glistening with fear. Her question was a mirror, reflecting the man I'd been before they broke me, a man who'd built for love, not vengeance. I turned to Daniel, my voice a broken shard. "You let them steal my place in your daughter's life, son," I said, tears burning my eyes. "But I'm still fighting for her." Then I faced the crowd, my voice a thunderclap. You thought you could erase me, but I'm Samuel Whitaker, and this empire is mine. You stole my legacy, but you can't steal my heart. Ethan nodded, his phone still recording. The evidence is undeniable, he said. Edward, Cassandra, you're done unless Samuel grants mercy. Cassandra's scream was a dying beast's cry, but Maria's steady gaze held me firm. We're with you, Mr. Whitaker, she said. You're not invisible anymore. The ballroom was a volcano, and I was the eruption. If you've ever been crushed by those you loved, if you've ever felt your soul torn by lies worth millions, tell me in the comments what you do when justice is yours to wield. Stay with me, the scales are tipping. The ballroom was a smoldering battlefield, the ashes of the Blake Empire settling around us as my truth, and the relentless tide of betrayals laid bare their greed. The crowd's frenzy was a living storm, their phones flashing like a meteor shower, capturing the ruins of a dynasty built on my stolen legacy. My oil-stained tuxedo, now a banner of triumph, bore the scars of a 20-year war scars that marked the theft of $100 million in dividends and a $500 million empire. My heart was a fractured mosaic, pieced together by the pain of Daniel's complicity and the radiant hope in Lily's trusting eyes. Her small hand in mine was a lifeline, but the tempest within me roared. Could I rebuild from this wreckage without losing the family I'd poured my soul into? The fire of my rage had burned away their lies, fueled by Cassandra's venom, Edward's collapse, and the silent betrayals of those who'd let me fade into obscurity. Yet, as I stood there, the man they'd tried to erase, I knew the truth was my foundation, and the future was mine to shape. Cassandra's face was a wreck of desperation, her designer gown a tattered relic as she staggered through the crowd, her voice a street-honed blade dripping with Cleveland venom. You're a lying piece of trash, Sam, she screeched, her words a final, futile assault. Think you can prance in here with your stinking rags and some fake-ass papers to gut us. You're a broke-down nobody who's been leeching pity forever. Get your sorry ass out of here before I make you eat those lies. Her venom was a dying ember, meant to scorch me, but it only illuminated my strength. Reggie, the security thug, loomed behind her, his fists clenched like boulders. Your history, old man, he growled. Keep this up, and I'll break you like the junk you are. But Ethan Caldwell stepped forward, his CEO authority, a fortress of steel. One more threat, and Titan Ventures ends you, he said, his voice a cold, unyielding promise. Samuel's the one building the future now. You're the ones buried. The first shock hit like a supernova. Carlos, the driver who'd stood by me, pulled a faded receipt from his wallet, his voice trembling with fury. This is from 1978, he said, holding it up. Samuel paid my cousin's hospital bills when Edward fired her for asking about his shares. He saved her life, while Edward laughed it off. The crowd's gasps were a tidal wave, their phones flashing as Carlos's receipt was passed to Evelyn. His loyalty, rooted in the kindness I'd shown decades ago, was a lighthouse in the storm. He'd been a kid I'd pulled from the streets, and now he fought for me when my own son hadn't. My throat tightened, the weight of his devotion clashing with the betrayal of those who'd turned my kindness into their profit. The second shock was a blade through my soul. Evelyn Turner raised a final document, her voice steady but sharp as a guillotine. This is a sworn affidavit from Margaret Whitaker's best friend, dated 2003, she said. It details a conversation where Edward admitted to sabotaging Samuel's reputation, spreading rumors of instability to justify cutting him out. Margaret begged her to keep it secret until the right moment. The crowd's murmurs turned to a roar, phones flashing, as Evelyn's affidavit was displayed. Daniel's face collapsed, his voice a broken sob. Dad, I believe those rumors, he choked out. Edward said you were losing it, that Mom was covering for you. I let them poison me. His confession was a fresh wound, his betrayal a dagger that cut deeper than any forged contract. I wanted to scream, to demand how he could have doubted his own father, but the pain was a chokehold, strangling my anger with grief. The third shock came from a new betrayer, Vanessa's assistant Lila, who'd been silent until now. She stepped forward, her face pale, her voice quivering. I hacked Cassandra's email last month, she confessed, her eyes avoiding mine. I found a thread where she and Edward planned to frame Samuel for embezzlement if he ever came after his shares. They wanted him in jail. Her admission was a bombshell, shattering the last of Cassandra's defenses. The crowd was a riot, voices shouting, cameras flashing as Lila's hands shook. Vanessa spun on her, her voice a vicious screech. You double-crossing skank, she screamed. You think you can stab us in the back? Sam's a washed-up loser, and you're just a cheap traitor. But Maria grabbed her arm, her loyalty fierce. Enough, Vanessa, she snapped. Mr. Whitaker's worth more than your entire world. My heart was a raw, bleeding wound, each revelation a fresh cut. Daniel's blindness, Lila's silence, Edward's schemes, they were a tapestry of deceit, spun to keep me invisible. I looked at Clara, her eyes streaming with tears, her hands clasped in desperation. "Uncle Sam, I saw those emails too," she whispered, her voice breaking. I thought they were just protecting their image. I should have told you. Her neutrality was a betrayal of its own, her silence enabling their greed. I wanted to forgive her, to believe she hadn't meant to hurt me, but the pain was a tsunami, drowning my hope. I'd built this empire for my family, only to watch them use it to erase me. The urge to let Evelyn unleash a legal firestorm, $100 million in stolen dividends, a $500 million empire was overwhelming. But Lily's voice broke through. "Grandpa, will you still teach me to build things?" she asked, her eyes glistening with hope. Her question was a mirror, reflecting the man I'd been before they broke me, a man who'd built for love, not vengeance. Unlike the tales where empires are reclaimed with vengeance, I chose a different path, one of healing over destruction. I turned to the crowd, my voice a steady beacon. "You stole my legacy, but I'm not here to burn you down. I'm Samuel Whitaker, and I'm rebuilding what you broke. Here's my verdict. Edward, you retire, and the board restructures under me. Cassandra, you'll work 500 hours at a Cleveland shelter, learning the value of honest work. Daniel, you'll face your shame and earn your place as my son again. The $100 million in dividends goes to the Whitaker Foundation. Educating Cleveland's kids' knowledge is power, and I want them to have it. This isn't revenge, it's justice, a lesson in what family means." The crowd was silent, their phones lowered, as Daniel nodded, tears streaming down his face. Cassandra sank to her knees, her fight gone, while Maria and Carlos stood tall, their loyalty my strength. The lessons of this night were etched in my soul. Knowledge of one's worth is the greatest weapon, and education and compassion is the truest wealth. Unlike the original tale, I didn't demand apologies or public shame. I demanded growth, a chance for my family to learn the knowledge of integrity, the lesson of humility, and the education of love over greed. The Whitaker Foundation would be my legacy, a beacon of knowledge and education for those who'd been overlooked, just as I had. If this story of betrayal and redemption touched you, hit that like button, subscribe to RevengeX on YouTube for more gripping tales, and share it with someone who needs this lesson. Tell me in the comments, how does this story resonate with your life? Have you faced betrayal and found the strength to rise? Your thoughts are knowledge we crave, a lesson we cherish, an education in shared humanity. Here's to your health. Your health, your health. May you live with joy and peace every day. Goodbye, and see you in the next video.